This game is already breaking records. This game is selling like hotcakes. I'm pulling from Christopher Dring at GamesIndustry.biz. The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom is the biggest boxed video game launch of the year in the UK. GFK also reveals that the game is Nintendo's second biggest release in UK history by revenue, behind 2008's Wii Fit. If we discount the balance board price, it actually is the biggest Nintendo release by revenue. In terms of units, the game only lags behind Wii Fit and the combined sales of Pokemon games, namely Sun and Moon and Scarlet and Violet. Its opening week sales eclipsed the box sales of Hogwarts Legacy by more than 50%.
Jesus.
This is just box sales, and Hogwarts, which was released on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S in February, did have a very strong digital launch. Switch digital sales are typically much lower than other platforms, so it's unknown if the game outsold Hogwarts overall. Because Nintendo doesn't share its digital data with the charts companies. It's easily the biggest Zelda launch in history, selling more than 2.7 times the opening week sales of Breath of the Wild from 2017. So I brought this in for two reasons. I brought this in because we have the bet about
my
Hogwarts
prediction
and Tears of the Kingdom, which I still admittedly think that you're going to beat me on, but I was like, hey, I have a W for today, and that's it. And I'm taking it. But the real reason I brought it in is because, one, I'm not surprised. I mean, and obviously this is just for the UK, but I feel like it's probably
no, this game is gonna sell fucking gangbusters.
Yeah, I mean, it was like that Animal Crossing moment of 2020 where I turn on my Switch for the first time to play it, and almost everyone on my friends list is playing Tears of the Kingdom, and it was just what a fun thing. But
yeah,
so here's my question. So we talked about this, man, months ago. At this point, we kind of went through the top games in Switch history in terms of unit sales. So a recap of that: Mario Kart 8 is at just under 54 million. Animal Crossing just above 42. Smash Bros is at 31. Breath of the Wild is at 29.8. And then Pokemon Sword and Shield are at 25.8. It's early, it just came out on Friday, but I'm curious if you think, based on what we just talked about from Christopher Dring and just like the general conversation happening, do you think this game will get into the top 5? And if so, where would you guess it's going to land, if so?
Are we talking top 5 in terms of like top 5
of
Switch games?
Yeah.
I think by the time that Switch's lifespan ends, I could see it definitely being in the top 5.
Yeah, I definitely see in the top 5 too.
Not in the top 3.
Yeah.
I think there's a very good likelihood. I think the one thing that we need to take into consideration when we start to talk about like how many Switches have sold, like this game is also not a game that like you're gonna have, like Patrick, for instance, like you have 3 Switches, so
two now.
Well, you've purchased 3 total.
I have purchased 3 Switches in the Switch's lifespan.
Okay, so because of that, it's like, okay, well, you make up 3 of those total purchases, and there's a lot of people out there like that. And there's like for instance, my brother, he got a Switch for his kids. Like they're not gonna play this game. This is not a game they're gonna play.
Cowards.
So like you got to take that in consideration. Now there's other games on the Switch that like I think could fit on more Switches for like, or that are more accessible for like an entire audience of people who own Switches. So I definitely think you run into this gamut where it's like, okay, well, we've sold a shit ton of Switches. I don't think that something like I see something like Wii Sports or something like that was one of the Nintendo's products where it's like, this is a universal game. Mario Kart's another one that I think like universal game. Anyone can play. So
sure,
you just get it for whatever age frame. So I think you have to take in consideration that there's that. I do also think that you run into the issue of, because this game is just on the Switch, like you are still limiting who your player base is going to be. So I think in total, at the end of the year, like I still feel confident that I think Hogwarts probably will still be the #1 selling game this year. But I wouldn't be shocked if this comes in at number 2.
Sure.
And I think in total, like I think this is going to end up being a top 5 game for the Switch. I think the one thing it's going to run into that might be the biggest issue is that it's just launching at the end of the Switch's life.
That's my thing. That's my thought is Breath of the Wild launched with the Switch and it's at 29 or nearly 20 or nearly 30 million, 29.81 million. It's had 6-7 years to sell. So my thing is I do still think that Tears of the Kingdom could eclipse that, but I won't be surprised if it doesn't,
Mhm.
because it's coming out at the end of the generation. And by the time Switch 2 comes out, will we have gotten to that 30 million? Now the question is,
Will it launch on the
if
Switch too?
exactly, will this game be playable on Switch 2? If this game is playable on Switch 2, I'm sure the numbers would then, splinter it
The
because
question is what, like, how Nintendo decides to proceed forward with this, right?
yeah, yeah.
So historically, Breath of the Wild technically launched on the Wii U, and
Right.
then came out later on, like a couple. It was only a couple months, I think, later, and it came out on the Switch. And so, there's that, right? So, like, this historically, like, this could be one of those things. So the question is like, when this launches, will this be like, will we rope these together? Like, will the Switch 2 have the same cartridge? Will it be using a disc? Like, what will it be using? And then, like,
Right.
how will they separate those numbers out? Are they going to be like, well, or is it going to be like a Tears of the Kingdom HD, or like whatever they decide to fucking call it? Like, what does that look like, and how do they rope those numbers in together? Because if you look at something like fucking Grand Theft Auto 5, right? Like, we talk about Grand Theft Auto 5 in total numbers sold,
Yeah.
but that shit also launched on the fucking Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3.
Right. And then the
And
PS4 and then the
and
PS5.
exactly,
Yeah.
same with Skyrim, the same situation. So it's like you've got so many different ways you can play this game, and we rope them all together. So, like, is that how we're going to do that? Are we going to rope these together where it's like, okay, well, this is, or is it going to be because of some, like, whatever they decide to call it if they do that?
Sure.
Then we start to run in the issue of remembering that this is also Nintendo, and you can't fucking play Wind Waker right now unless you have a fucking Wii U or a GameCube.
Right. Or a Steam Deck.
Or so, yeah, or if you're
and you're
running it
being
on,
naughty.
you're being naughty. And same with like Twilight Princess.
Yeah.
The only thing that got a fucking bump was fucking Skyward Sword, which, for what it's worth, like, we didn't really rate Skyward Sword that highly, but like Skyward Sword had like a pretty cool. I remember Skyward
It's
Sword
still a
having
good
like
game.
a
Yeah.
a really fun story.
Yeah.
But then you also have games like Link's Awakening. They got like a completely different reimagining.
Yeah. Well,
And they got
the crazy thing about Zelda on Switch right now is most of the Zelda catalog is playable on Switch at this point. We're missing Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. We're missing Ocarina and Majora. No, that's not true because they're on the Nintendo 64 now. But we're gonna get a Twilight port. We're gonna get a Wind Waker port. So really, it's the DS games that we're missing. We're about to get the Oracle games on the Game Boy Advance one, because we already have Minish Caps. Like, you can play most of the Zelda games on the platform, which is kind of nuts. Speaking of the Wii U, though, I had this thought when you said that it was also on the Wii U. I was like, I wonder how Breath of the Wild is sold on the Wii U. It's the number 13 best-selling game on the Wii U because everyone bought it for Switch. Isn't that crazy? Fucking the Wind
also
Waker HD.
okay, but also no one had a fucking Wii U. So
Sure, it only sold 1.7 million copies though. Mario Kart 8 sold 8.5 million, which is basically like 100% attach rate. Basically, everyone that had a Wii U had Mario Kart. But I just thought that was funny. Cayman, you brought up a good point in terms of Ocarina, Majora, these other games from the past, or I'm sorry, not Ocarina of Majora, Twilight and Wind Waker not being on the Switch.